Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Phin Robinson, who is physiotherapist and also director at Pure Physiotherapy. Phin, how are you doing?
Very well, thanks, Andy. Thanks for inviting me along. Pleased to be here. Be interesting to have a chat.
Yeah, well, from our pre-chat, I'm looking forward to it already. So thanks for joining. So Phin, whereabouts are you from originally?
Born in Doncaster. No one's asked that question yet on one of these. Good effort. Born in Doncaster and grew up in a place called Retford. If you go up and down the A1 ever, you'll know Retford. It's just sort of off the A1 before you get to Doncaster, which is a great place. I've said that enough now, so there you are. And then I trained as a physio in Hertfordshire at Hatfield University. Did sort of placements in and around London as a physio, and then worked for 10 years in Sheffield originally, before I then started branching out around that sort of northwest. So I've had a bit of the training's did one of the masters in Sheffield as well. So northern with a bit of a southern break initially to do my undergrad.
Very good. So yeah, there's a Retford hospital, isn't there?
There is, yeah.
Yeah. So because remember one of the products that we've got is using hand therapy, but I know that I'm trying to think of the person it was now, because yeah, she was a hand therapist. But anyway, Retford, that's the only reason I know Retford. But I remember going for a meeting in Retford. So is Louis Tomlinson your favourite One Directioner then?
Yeah. Do you know what's funny? I've got friends that I went to secondary school with in Doncaster who played a football match, and he did a charity football match with him as well. So yeah, he's certainly their favourite One Direction fan. I don't know, or member, but I don't know about not a massive One Direction follower personally, but they obviously are in Doncaster.
And then my last Donny reference then. So I was in Portugal, it was about 3 years ago for a stag do, and just beautiful, iconic setting. And I just kind of looked over this pathway, and there was just Donny on tour, this big sticker just stuck over the bar there. But I got a photo of it. It made my Instagram.
Oh, very good. Yeah, it's a great place. We actually cover the first contact physio work for the whole of Doncaster. So all 6 of the primary care networks in Doncaster we cover. So although I'm not up there myself as much as I certainly was in the past, we've got a brilliant team of physios up there, and it's actually a great place to work. In fact, one of the clinical directors from one of the PCNs went to my secondary school as well. I didn't know her then; she's a few years below me, but yeah, it's amazing how many people have got a link back to Doncaster. Who knows?
So where are you living now then?
I live in Norfolk, just outside Norwich, and essentially what happened, as I say, I trained in Hertfordshire, worked in Sheffield for about 10 years, including I used to commute across to Manchester from Sheffield. And you mentioned when we were in the pre-chat about some stuff with Man United. I did a bit of work with the team doctor from Man U when I was working at Bupa, which has then become Spire. At Wally Range, I was there for a bit of time, which I really enjoyed actually. But I travelled from Sheffield each time, and then my wife's from Norwich, so we moved down to Norwich. And then the intention at the time, so we'd set up Pure Physio in 2006. So we moved down, set Pure Physio in 2006. By 2008, it was doing really, really well. And that's based in Sheffield, and that sort of round area. By the time we moved down to Norfolk, we were going so well that I thought I'm going to do 2 days a week in Sheffield, kill myself for 2 days, see loads of patients, and then basically cut my grass for the remaining 3 days a week, and then have 2 days off the weekend. And I was about 31 at the time, and I moved down here, and I did that for about 3 weeks, and I was going out of my mind. You don't know so much grass you can cut in your 30s before you think this is not the way to be long term. So that's when we started opening up a clinic in Norwich, and that's what's now progressed. Our progression for Pure has sort of been triggered by just naturally moving from Sheffield to Norwich, being a little bit bored and looking at what we could do in Norwich as well. And that spurred off a bit more sort of growth of Pure to sort of headed towards where it is now. So
right. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So what made you get into physio in the first place? And then what happened before Pure? How did that happen?
The way I got into physio is interesting because I actually originally applied for university to do architecture. And I was very proud at the time. This is my A levels from Doncaster. I got 6 unconditional offers, or I think it was 6. It could have been 5. I've gradually over the years increased an extra one based on an art portfolio. I did sort of design type art. I did geography, A level, biology, and ethics. How I got into physio, I don't know. And how I got into architecture, I've no idea why they got me in. Anyway, just before I was about to start, so this is in the August, I got me offers. I was going to go to Liverpool, really excited about doing architecture. I then read the plan that it was going to be when I started university. In the first week, it was about the structural properties of concrete. And I thought, that is not what I want to do. I want to draw buildings and have some great ideas, design and things, but I don't want to learn about structural properties of concrete. So I deferred. I then changed and applied. My dad was a teacher, went to his university. I had no idea what physio was. Looked at the prospectus. Physio was in there, sounded quite good. Looked at the back page where it said physio, applied to every single prospectus that had the word physio in it, didn't even know where they were. And then I went off to India for 6 months and had a gap year. And when I came back, I looked, I had this sort of yak skins coat and all sorts of interesting things that I'd picked up in India. And I came off the plane. Mum and Dad were saying, oh, well done, you've got into one university. I was devastated. I was crying because I thought, what do you mean one university? My ego, prior to going, I thought I'll get 600 conditional offers. Of course I will, same as I got for architecture. Obviously, I had the worst A levels ever. Geography doesn't really help with physio. Art doesn't really help with physio. Ethics, well, maybe. And biology, that was my only saving grace. So I got into physio at Hertfordshire, which was a fantastic university, and I absolutely loved it. But when I got my degree result at the end of 3 years, the admissions tutor came up to me, and I'd had a few drinks by the time I went to pick up my results, and I got a first class, and which I was, I'd worked really, really hard. First year, I basically just drew pictures of anatomy, which looked great on my bedroom walls, looked fantastic drawing knees, and still do it now with patients, but didn't necessarily help me get through assignments. But by the second year, I started really enjoying it. The third year, I was absolutely loving it. I really converted to physio. I loved it. And the admission tutor came to me and said, Finn, you should thank your dad. I said, well, my dad's not done my degree for me. He said, but no, you didn't get into this university. I said, what do you mean? He said, you didn't get into any university to do physio. And we were the last one to reject you when you were in India. So she knew all this from 3 years. She hadn't mentioned it to me for 3 years. And I said, what happened to my dad? Had rung up this admission tutor and said, begged her, basically saying, look, you're the last university that my son's applied to. Everyone said no. Can you please let him? If you let him in, you'll get a first. And he never told me that for 3 years. And I hadn't got a first at anything. B's were the best I ever got at GCSE levels. I worked really hard to get a B. But by the time I got to university, because I really loved it, I started doing better. I enjoyed it. I did better. So I didn't get into physio. My dad wangled me into it. I worked hard, got a first, which is what he promised I'd get, and it was great. So that's where I was. Yeah, that's why I ended up doing physio. It's a bit of a random story, really. Very
random.
thankful. Very thankful.
Is that a typical? Are you surprised that your dad had done that for you? Because it does genuinely sound like something my dad would do to me as well.
No, I think without going into big, my dad's not with me anymore, not here anymore. But without going into too much praise of my dad, he had his own flaws and things. But one thing that's filtered through into my life, which answers your question really, Andy, is that is standard for my dad, and actually it's something I try and portray in life, in business, in family life now, which is businesses don't buy from businesses, people buy from people. Everyone's heard this sort of idea, and it's absolutely true. So when I'm presenting, when I'm talking to potential new contracts or interviewing or lecturing or whatever I'm doing, I try and just talk to an individual like an individual. I get things wrong. I'll look up to the left and right, and I'll cover the cameras with my hands and all sorts by mistake, but I'll do it in a way which is just human. I've not got any script. I've not got anything written. I'll just talk how I talk. And I think that's one thing that my dad has taught me, which would help me a lot in business and in life, is if there's no harm in asking. You may as well just be honest and say, look, like my dad was, he's not getting anywhere. Please, will you do this? I mean, fair enough, he offered a ridiculous thing. How on earth, it's pure, he sold me quite strongly there to say I was going to get a first. It was the first that a male got at that university. So it was a big deal for me at the time, and it still is, as you can tell. I like talking about it. And if Nigel Tilley, who's one of the European Golf Tour consultant physios, is listening to this, then I'd encourage him to remember that I got the first. He only got a 2-1. But we had a little bit of competition at the time. Since then, he's gone on to great things. But so it is like my dad would do. And I try. I've got 3 children. I try and remember that when people are perhaps putting a blocker in ways of not meaning to, but they say, my children, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. I think, well, is there a way we could have a chat about it? And you know, no brown envelopes involved, but could you just have a chat and say, look, could you see yourself just at helping out here? Generally speaking, people do. I think people don't ask enough to say, you know, and also being appreciative. Yeah, I'm sure my dad would have been really appreciative, and actually it worked out well for the university as well, because they got a first from it. So yeah, there's no harm asking is definitely what I learned from him.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with that. And that's something which I think with my parents, I'd always try and push, and I'd like be resistive against it. So no, I can empathise, but now I'm the same with trying to help people. No, always ask. There's absolutely no harm in asking at all. And then in terms of the architecture, has that been, you talked about you drawing things, has that been beneficial? Have you taken skills you think from that's been helpful?
Yeah, I definitely. I think the for me in business in Pure, and I'm also really interested in property still. So when I qualified in 2001, me and Nigel, who have thrown his name in already, we started buying houses in Sheffield, and at that time, houses in Sheffield were about 42 grand. So you could buy a house. You know, I think my first salary as a physio was £16,000. So you know, £42,000 from £16,000, still pretty decent value. So we were buying houses and we were renovating. So working at the Northern General Hospital in Sheffield as junior physios, and we were coming home from work every night. And my girlfriend, who's now my wife at the time, became a little bit jaded by this, but I just spent every night doing up houses. I was roofing houses. I was putting kitchens and bathrooms in houses. I won't say they were very good, but they went in and they functioned for a period of time. You wouldn't want me to get anyone doing the roofs now, but it was great time. So that drive to do something yourself, I think, then also fed into us wanting to do our own practice and develop our own practice, because and there is an element of design that comes with business as well. I think you need to be planning forward, thinking, well, what could you do here? What could you do there? So it's not necessarily drawing things out, but the idea about, you know, the foundations, planning something that's going to be then good for the next bit, and then redesigning something. And I'm still heavily involved in how the clinics look for Pure. You know, the branding, the way we want the rooms to look smart and professional and clean and tidy, and maybe a little bit quirky. We've got some places that have got exposed brickwork and in quite old buildings that we've renovated and tried to keep as much of the original features as possible. So a little nod to the architectural ambitions that I certainly had at one point.
You keep the concrete to a minimum, though, based on rigid.
Very minimal. Yeah, very minimal concrete. No real knowledge of structural properties of concrete, unfortunately.
So then, in terms of that, then, so you're obviously entrepreneurial even straight after graduating. Did you have a vision then? Did you have Pure in mind, or what was it?
Yeah, we I say we. So me and Nigel originally set up Pure, and we both were doing a master's at the time in Sheffield in MACP Masters in musculoskeletal physio. And I was loving. I just got a job as a extended scope physio, which was very early on in my career, probably arguably too early, although I felt ready for it. I was very keen, very keen. I put myself on all sorts of external courses from the second I qualified. As I said, I loved university, and I just didn't stop learning from there on, really. So I was self-funding everything. So I never asked for, you know, I didn't go to the trust and say, can I have a course for this? I just paid for it because I just wanted to get on, and I enjoyed doing it. And we'd, even at university, talked about having our own little practice. During this masters, we'd set up Pure Physio, and Nigel, we were secret shopped basically by one of the European golf tours, the head of performance, head of sports, head of treatment, I don't know what he calls himself, Rob, lovely guy. He came on and he said, come and have a meal. And Nigel at the time was in a sort of more relaxed position than I was. He said, yeah, I'll do it. I'll join the European golf tour and be a physio for the golf tour around Europe. I had a girlfriend, now my wife. She said, you're definitely not doing anything that involves more work than doing the houses up, doing the physio and doing all the courses, so you can sort off. So I ended up not doing it, and it's been great because I then continued to develop Pure. At that point, it was really just a one-man band or two-man band, and he went off and did the European golf tour, which he's been, you know, done the Olympics, he's done the multiple Ryder Cups. He's very much happy in that world, and I'm very happy in my sort of more orthopedic-y MSK type world, which I had developed into. So we always had a bit of an ambition, and I became increasingly ambitious as I could see what we could do. You know, the benefit we could have in a work-life balance, in how we could develop, or how I could develop initially how the business grew, how many days we worked, how long we stayed with patients. If we wanted to follow them from a Saturday, Sunday, whatever, you could do what you wanted to do. Whereas you're obviously constrained by many things in the NHS around that. We weren't. And then we had some people join, and the company grew from there. So from quite an early stage, yeah, it was. I was really keen to do something that we'd have some control over.
And did you have any particular vision, like we talked about mission statements and so on before we came on, but like, did you have a real set plan? You like talked about having the freedom of doing things, but did you know the direction you wanted to go in?
Pretty early, yeah. The key reason that I wanted to do something is to provide what I would consider at the time, and still now, to be a really good quality service, and not constrained by anything really. Time, obviously, cost as a private practitioner, there's a cost to take into account. But we kept our prices at £35 assessment and £30 treatment for years and years and years, with the view that actually we want it to be affordable so people could access it, and it was a really high quality. So it was never done out of a want to make tons of money and become, you know, super rich and drive a big car. It was done out of a want to do something that's enjoyable, make a difference, structure your work life in a way which you could to do things, not have to put in annual leave requests or study leave requests, because we could just fund it. If it made sense, I just fund it as I always had done. And then as we grew and people started coming in to work with us, I'd like to think we kept that focus on quality and patient satisfaction, and also physio satisfaction. And there's something we really strive to maintain now. I think the bigger you get, the harder that is. But we've invested loads and loads in sort of health and well-being, CPD for our staff. So something that I'm just increasingly, I mean, we talked on the pre-chat, Andy, about the CPD and training, and I think the last 10, 15 years, my experience of the NHS settings is that with the pressures they're under, the CPD, the regular one-to-ones, the weekly face-to-face training for junior and developing staff just started disappearing. And in a lot of the NHS settings that I was sort of linked to or working within. And I didn't want that to happen at Pure. So we every week we have one-to-ones, face-to-face training sessions for staff that are developing. We have breakout sessions every lunchtime for everyone. So those original thoughts that we had back in 2006 around quality and flexibility and doing the best to make sure that physios and the patients are happy certainly have continued to now. And they're probably what drove us in the first place to start in Pure.
And then what was it, do you think, like in terms of your growth then, have there been moments or specific things that you think actually, yeah, that's what helped us kick on then, that's what helped us kick on
definitely then? There's a couple of interesting things that have made a massive difference to me. When we moved to Norfolk, and I said, you know, I was at this, I mean, it's when I look at it now, when I look at the idea, it's just ludicrous to think I was going to cut the grass. I bought a little house with a massive garden. Basically, it was a little house with a 2-acre garden field, which we bought at some point and just lobbed on the side of it. So, you know, and I'm a keen gardener. I used to go, you know, go out on a Friday or Saturday night in Sheffield, have a, you know, I enjoy a few beers, and next morning I'd sit and watch Monty Don on iPlayer or a recorder and watch Gardener's World, and all my mates were coming down, sleep on the floor, say, "What are you doing?" So I'm just watching. They're planting some tulips. It's like, you're having a laugh, but I genuinely enjoyed it. So when I had the opportunity to buy a big garden, I wasn't really worried about the house. I went for it. So, but after a while, I say of cutting the grass, I thought I need to do it more, and that then triggered. I was looking at something in Norwich, which I wouldn't, you know, I would never have opened a clinic in Norwich. But then I realised that actually the provision in Norwich at the time was negligible for sort of there were, don't be careful how to word this. There was practices around, but they were using techniques and approaches which probably weren't being taught anymore. They were probably quite historic ways of approaching things. So as I'd worked in Sheffield, London, Manchester, I'd locum for about a year and a bit as well in different areas. So I'd done quite a lot of postgraduate training. So I think my ideas at the time, my evidence base at the time was really good, hopefully still is. So by bringing that into an area where that didn't seem to be as strong was a great opportunity. It was a great opportunity, and we grew a really good clinic here. But one of the biggest triggers for me and lessons I learned is that when we moved to Norwich, not long after we moved here, we were very dependent in Sheffield on one contract with a big national provider. They moved to taking everything in-house. So all of a sudden, let's say 80% of our work in our sort of base clinics overnight disappeared. And this coincided with me getting a new car and having a son. So I had a daughter already, that's me having a son. I was like, oh my goodness, moved to Norwich, got rid of my 8A ESP job that I was doing sort of 1 or 2 days a week still in Sheffield. Got a new car, can't really afford, and got a son, which means my wife's now not working. She's a physio as well. But that meant that rather than cutting the grass and sitting back and taking things steady, I had to, not only did I want to move on, I had to really push on. And that then led to a complete change. So that loss of a major source, I mean, 80% of the clinic's income then triggered me back into action again. And we've now got clinics in the Northwest, lots in South Yorkshire, and a significant, well, most of East Anglia as well, and including some areas in the south, on the south coast now, and looking at London. So I think it's how you respond to some of these things that happen in life, some of which are fortunate, moving to Norwich originally with a nice garden, some of which are not fortunate, as in a major contract goes, a huge blow, and I took that really personally, took it really hard. But the way we reacted, I think, allowed us to be where we are now.
And was the business in trouble when that happened then?
Yes, it was. But not because we could contract. We weren't massive then, so because we could contract very quickly. Essentially, it's me working really hard, and 3 or 4 other physios, working semi-part-time type roles, already doing other NHS work themselves. So it's easy enough to contract down pretty rapidly. I'd made a commitment to, particularly to one of our members of the team who was working with the GB volleyball team at the time, working towards London 2012, that we'd give her stability. So I felt very responsible for her particularly. She still works with us now. She's sort of right hand in clinic. She's fantastic. Kay Atkins, let's give her a shout out. She's doing a PhD at the minute into sort of disabled access at Nottingham University. So she's not Nottingham, Coventry, I think. Anyway, she did a PhD, and but she still works at Pure. And so that was a responsibility I felt very much to make sure that the promise I'd made to her we could keep. But as I say, the trigger off the back of that was brilliant. So it was in trouble, but we weren't big enough for it to be. We had enough headspace. There was enough flex that could be given to allow us to get through. And I think businesses during COVID, I must have been extremely hard for an awful lot of people. I think we were very fortunate with COVID, but I know. Well, I've talked to many people, business owners, physios as well, whose practices have just not survived the COVID period of time, or they've come out of it with so much debt that they're sort of very much walking wounded, and it's sad to see. But we were fortunate at the time to be very badly hurt by it, but we could adapt quick enough, and we were small enough to get through it.
So how does that feel? In fact, no, I'll ask that in a second, or ask for an answer on that. So how does it feel now that you're bigger? So if you kind of remember that one, but then also like the kind of the growth up from that period. So that wasn't that long ago that you were doing that then. So like, how did it go from there then in terms of size?
In the last 10 years, we've gone from 10 years, probably 5 people. Maybe to 200 people now, which is mad really. And what's allowed that growth to happen is I've moved location in Nottingham. Sorry, we've got a clinic in Nottingham now as well. A couple of weeks ago, but it's being prudent. So it's not ever getting that position again. So not ever having reliance of 80% of your work in one basket. You could gamble it and it could work out well for your entire business life, I think, doing that. But I never want to be in that position again, because I was so unbeknown to me, really, reliant on one supplier. And it wasn't the people I was dealing with's fault. I say fault, because I had a really good relationship with them. We were, preferred supplier in this area. It's a really solid relationship. But it was taken, the decision to pull everything in-house was taken so high up in the company that no one, the information I was getting was being given with tears by the people giving it to me. And I think I just never want to be in a position where I'm so dependent or and on a particular revenue stream. And as you get bigger, what I feel now is the people that work for us, for Pure, as in our team, I feel massively responsible for them. This is the worst thing about being big for me. Worst and best thing is that I don't want anyone to ever become made redundant. So I'll do whatever I feel I can, whatever I can to make sure it's diverse, to make sure we can support, because it's not just those people, the employees, it's the people's partners, it's the children, it's their ambitions with a holiday or with a house, with a car, whatever it might be. And so, and I've gained a new respect, I think, for business owners, whether they're small or big. More so in the last 5 years, where we've started to get really quite big, because we've also got 2 sister companies, like an administrative company for medical experts, and a rehabilitation company for like catastrophic injuries, the sort of pain management, catastrophic injury type company. They're separate from Pure, but I've got a hand in those as well. So as we've got bigger, and I've realised the responsibility you've got to your staff. And also the regulations that are coming in more and more around staff and around pensions and around what's required, health and well-being wise. I just think it's hard. Business owners are doing a good job to employ anyone at the minute, and certainly to grow. We've been lucky, but when I look at people that have gone through COVID, and then they've got that responsibility, and they perhaps aren't able to react as well, because physio. People are going to feel pain. People don't want to feel pain. They can do something about it. Physio can help. There's plenty of evidence now increasing all the time around what it can and what it can't do. So we're not quite recession proof, but we're certainly protected to some degree by that. Other businesses aren't necessarily as protected, and certainly during COVID. So if you're employing people, I've got a huge respect for people that have employed people, big or small. As we've grown, that respect's increased, and my concern about our team, it has increased. Whether everyone in our team recognises that feeling of personal responsibility I've got for them, probably not. And I wouldn't want them to necessarily think about that, but it is there, and I don't know whether you feel it as well, but it's a funny thing when you've got 1 or 2 people work for you, 3, 4, 5, 600, 200, 500, whatever. Actually, I look at some of the sort of FTSE 100 bosses and think, I wonder whether they feel, even though they don't know their team at all, they might know a handful of the people that are in their team, the hundreds or thousands of people they've got on their team. But I wonder whether they get up in the morning and they think, I have to make X number of people redundant. I would be a nightmare at that. And I wonder whether they probably won't articulate it, but whether they feel the pressure of that situation. So I think growth is a fickle thing, brilliant and fantastic. But I'm mindful I don't want to shrink. I don't want to have that 80% disappear again. So that's given us, I think, some resilience and robustness, because the way I'm looking for things, I don't want, if someone said, let's pivot everything to this one new direction, which is a huge opportunity, but it's new and it's, it might change in a few years' time. I'd rather say, well, we'll do a little bit of that, but we'll not move away from our original principles, our core.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So how have your stress levels been then, from being, say, a team of 5 through to now 200? Does it change?
I think there's several things that have been really key to me to not being too stressed. One is I do worry about the wider team, because I feel responsible for them. Once we got an admin person on board, originally I thought it's 20 grand wasted, or whatever it was, 24 grand wasted, because that's just profit gone. And then when I realised, actually, by getting the admin person on, I was mentally more stable. I thought, hang on a minute, that's 24 grand well spent. And then when I realised they could book in twice as many people as I could do on my mobile phone, which is how it ran for a long time, then I thought, hang on a minute, I'm missing a trick here. Then we got a second admin person. That meant we could get 2 more physios. And all of a sudden, it was a bit of a light bulb moment, thinking, actually, there's no harm in taking what you might perceive as a hit to profit, to margin, if it means the sustainability improves massively. If it means I can go on holiday and we don't have a huge drop in turnover because everything's not dependent on me anymore, or these 2 people or 3 people. If it's dependent on 30 people, then 2 of them going on holiday doesn't make a difference. If it's dependent on 100 people, then 20 people going on holiday doesn't make a huge difference. It's not massive for a week. So that's been helpful. And what I think we've been really lucky at, hopefully deliberately, is recruiting the right people, strong people to come in to help. And don't always get it right. And I'm not always the best boss, I'm sure, because I'm so passionate about certain things. I'll not listen. I'll run down a dead end street for a while until I realise it's a dead end, and I'll come back up, tail between my legs and say, "Oh, you were right. Let's try a different route." But we've got good people now saying that's a dead end. Don't bother going down it, Finn. Let's look at something else. And I think so. The stress levels are there, but they're managed and they're better because I think we've got it's spread across a sort of leadership team now, which are, we've got some really capable people, including people like Kay, who have been here since 2008, informing decisions, informing how things develop, but trying to maintain those original principles. But stress is a funny thing. How do you find it?
It can honestly change through the course of a day. It's like it's absolutely buzzing. You get a good email, phone call, I've a good chat with you, say, and then it's like you get some news, and it's like I think I've plateaued a little bit, but as we were saying before, it really can fluctuate. Fundamentally, I'm a very positive and upbeat person, but yeah, sometimes when it's to do with numbers and like we've expanded a bit since COVID, and yeah, when you've got fixed costs of X amount per month, and it's like you've got to hit that. That is just it. You've got to hit it.
It's just interesting. I was chatting to our marketing director at lunchtime an hour or so ago, and he was saying just about another example from a different company where they had a target in their company to say we've got to hit £500,000 worth of billable time per month. And what he said the problem with that is that they weren't expressing to the employees that doesn't mean £500,000 of profit. That means £500,000 of turnover, which basically means they break even. So until they hit £500,000 of turnover, no one makes a penny. They've basically got enough to keep the lights on. And once that was explained to staff, all the grumbles that they had around pay and blah, 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 just disappeared, because then they thought, hang on a minute, we as a team have got to hit that for our sake, for my desk mate's sake, for everyone around us sake. So it created that bit more inclusiveness. So one thing I hope we're good at, and again, we ask our staff through surveys quite regularly how they're feeling, because I think anonymous surveying is probably quite a healthy thing to do, is transparency. So we try and be very transparent about how we're doing, as a company, but also just some degrees of financial, so that people can understand, we're not there to profiteer off people. We're there to try and make things sustainable, to grow things, do interesting things, and make the jobs enjoyable. But you're right, when you grow, when you turn your fixed costs are X, you've got to hit X before you can make a penny. And I think looking from an outside at a business that's turning over 500,000, 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, it can look great. But if their margin is small, the pressure is substantial. And I think, again, it's something that's relatively easy to take for granted. And I think when you're not involved in business and you look at that and you think, well, that's turning over £1 million. It's crazy. But the reality is, the picture's not that simple. And employing staff, 18% on top of their normal salaries, when you've got to take into account national insurance and pension, all these factors are substantial. So it is an interesting thing. But as you say, stress for me fluctuates all the time, and I do. Wife says, I do live off it as well. I live off. This is how I am. I'm like this all the time, unless I'm watching a film, in which case I'm more or less comatose. But I'm always like this, and I kind of need pressure. I seek pressure because I live off it, goods and bads. Thankfully I don't gamble. Otherwise, I think I'd be absolutely bankrupt. I'm so bad at gambling, I never got into it, which I think is a very good thing for me.
Yeah, well, I guess doing your own business is gambling to some extent anyway.
Yeah,
you're just fully invested. But no, I mean, I agree. Like, we're in capital equipment sales, so our turnover is high, but then you've got cost of equipment, shipping. There's so many different variables in there. And like one of my colleagues asked me the other day on our team outing, when do you want to retire? And it's like, it's not even on my radar, really. I really enjoy doing what we're doing, but to be able to not have to work, I think that's a nice thing. Like, I was off with my girlfriend last week, the week before, and I was probably a nightmare for her because was not switching off at all. Like, people had been off on holiday, and it was just like, I could just sort of tell she's like, yeah, you're you're not listening to this, are you? And I'm just like, no, I am. It's like,
Yeah, I absolutely understand that. It's a very interesting one. I was away last week with my wife and kids in France, and I've stopped taking my phone on holiday, which is a really good thing to do, and I would encourage you, if you can, to do it. Other than I've now started taking my laptop instead of my phone. So I take my laptop and I say I'm leaving work. I even put a post on LinkedIn, I think, saying that's it. I'm kind of out of office for a bit. And the reality was I didn't have my phone. I didn't really try and look at LinkedIn, which I'm a bit addicted to, but I did. I was on the emails every day, because I thought, actually it's less stressful for me just to jump on morning and evening for half an hour, respond to things, than put an out of office email on, get back on at the end of the holiday and have 50 emails, like probably 30 of which are really important to get back to. Even with the best people looking at your emails, sometimes it's you that probably can give the quickest answer back to people. So I think that is an interesting one. I know when I talk to some different people in business around how they manage their, especially in healthcare businesses, how they manage their downtime, they often give a similar answer. It's difficult, but part of that's because I enjoy it. You probably enjoy it. That's why you will have been thinking a little bit, actually this, actually that.
yeah. No, well, as Chris Myers is a friend from Sports Medicine Ultrasound Group, and he's been off for this month, and texted him quite a bit of stuff, and he was literally texting me as he was going up a volcano. So he was sort of sending me these photos, talking about an ultrasound education evening, and I was like, yeah, I love it, but I don't want to ruin your holiday. Even actually, one of the Premier League physio was texting today. He's like, I'm on holiday, I'm chasing that purchase order, Andy, just leave it with me. But you don't mean to, but it's just like it's on your mind. You want to progress things.
I think what I described to Vicky, my wife, this last week, is that it is work. I do find it stressful sometimes, but I love it, and actually it's a hobby as well, because I'm quite happy to look through LinkedIn in an evening. I enjoy it. And maybe that makes me a bit of a lunatic, I don't know. I'm quite happy to check through the emails and make sure everything's been responded to, and look at the clinic diaries and stuff. I kind of, it is something I enjoy doing. It's not just work for me. It never has been. And I think maybe people that do set up and run businesses and found things, probably that is for them, and for other people as well in the business. I'd like to think that we've got many of the people at Pure that actually enjoy not just what they do day to day, but have got a thinking about, actually, what about this, what about that. And I know there's people that will message me on a Friday evening, 8 o'clock, saying, I've just been down the pub and I suddenly thought about this. I think, oh, that's a great idea. And we texted 8 o'clock at night on a Friday, whenever it might be, kind of about work things. But it's because it is quite interesting. It is quite exciting. It is probably a hobby as well as work.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. You want people to rest, but you also want people that are fully engaged and they enjoy it, because I think it's stimulating. That's why I definitely agree with you with the transparency on things. It's because for me, I want to employ people that I trust, and I don't. If I didn't trust them to give them the numbers, then they're probably not the right person to work with us. But how was that for you in terms of being able to be transparent about margin or whatever else that you're doing?
I think it's interesting, because obviously with 200 physios, our turnover is now it's substantial. It's when I look back, again, it's about 10 years, it's probably maybe £400,000, then 6, then 7, then 1.1, 1.2, 1.7, 2, 2, 3. Well, it goes up and up. We're quite a big. I mean, for me, it's mind blowing when I look at we're meant to be doing projections for next year. I had the finance director on earlier on this morning, and I'm looking at the figures, thinking these are insane figures, and they don't have any really relevance to me day to day, other than to think everything then's increased, but the cost that comes with that is increased as well. The drag, I call it drag, it's probably not a right nice word. Me, I'm a drag to the business. This fixed cost that comes with it, and the rent and everything else increases as well, and you can't avoid that. I think to show the transparency of those figures is hard to, even for me to make sense of. And then we've got two elements to the business really with Pure. We've got a very big NHS partnership presence, which is not just FCP, it's MSK pathways, it's orthopedic triage, the elements, and then we've got the sort of private clinic element, which is big as well. And that's been our historic base, which is sports related issues. We've got some fantastic sports physios, and then normal MSK work, which I love. That's my personal real passion, is I class normal MSK, people off the street that walk in with a bad back or a bad knee, and you work as a FCP. If you want to diagnose, you assess, you advise, you educate, you treat, you do recurrent treatments as required, you let them go, and that's my passion. So you've got these two NHS links, private links, two elements, very, very different in terms of margin, very different in terms of profitability. The NHS stuff, brilliant, really solid, can't go wrong. The private clinic stuff, hard work. Ultimately, for me, I want to say more rewarding, but rewarding, really rewarding with the patients we treat and the work we do. But a lot of costs associated with that. You've got estates, you've got all the insurance element. There's lots of different things with that, and that's something I'm really focused on for the next couple of years. Is the coming out of COVID, it's bringing back up and developing the clinics aspects of things, and that's something that I think over the next 6 months we'll see increase a lot. And we've gone from, for example, in the Northwest, a sort of big regional physiotherapy company called Total Physio went into liquidation about 6, 8, maybe 9 weeks ago now, or maybe 12, which is always sad to see, whether it's a competitor or not. It's always sad to see a business struggling. But we then looked at 5 of their sites that they had vacated, and we moved into 5 sites. Now, to take on 5 new sites in a month is I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. It was madness. And at the same time, we sort of merged with a site in Bedford as well. So 6 sites in about 6 weeks was just mayhem. But it's exciting. And so the transparency element of what we're doing, how we're actually getting on, in one hand, it's easy because the top line figures, you can say, look, we're doing great, guys. Everyone's doing great. Well done. But then if you break it down, the clinic's margin is nowhere near what the margin is perhaps for other elements. So we have these sort of 3 monthly CPD updates for every single member of the clinical staff. So 200 people down tools and have a CPD day, talk sessions in the morning, and then face-to-face work in the afternoon. And within that, we do a little update about what's going on, what's the plan for the next 3 months. We do a big Christmas do, which we just signed off today, which is become a ludicrous budget now for our Christmas do. That's in Sheffield, Christmas time, 17th December. No one else is welcome. We've got too many people. But you know, that's we're gonna have a bit of an awards ceremony there. We're going to discuss, you know, how people are doing and that sort of thing. Try and pull out some individual sort of stars within the company. And so I think it's still very good, that transparency and communication. It's harder as you get bigger, and it becomes naturally, I don't like the word, but more corporate. I'm keen to keep it as uncorporate as we can while still getting the benefits and the requirements of the sort of employment law and bits and pieces. But yeah, it's harder, and the figures become less meaningful, I think, when it gets to millions, because, you know, 40 quid a treatment session, that's a lot of treatment sessions to get to £1 million. But when you've got a lot of staff, it's not that difficult. It just becomes less relevant to an individual staff member himself to see how we can get to that point. So it's interesting. Something we strive to maintain.
And in terms of then culture, so just from that, how involved are you in recruitment, and are there any particular things for what do you look for when you're recruiting people at any level?
So later on after this, I've got a chat with our recruitment team. We've got a lady called Charlie Copsey. I call her Charlie Chopsey, but she's fantastic. She's only been with us 6 months, I think, and she's just absolutely brilliant. So we brought her on as a sort of well-being and recruitment facilitator, manager, in addition to our HR team. So we've got a really nice HR team, because we wanted to maintain that culture. So we wanted to have well-being. We wanted to get in touch with people that are perhaps, you know, that aren't really engaged because maybe they're struggling, maybe they're just quiet, whatever it might be, and just make sure everyone's okay. Historically, I'd do that. I'd ring round and text message on WhatsApp and just get in touch with everyone and know things. We can't do that anymore. So we wanted someone to help to try and coordinate that, and that sort of team feeling is something we work really hard to try and develop. So we set up something like a Hogwarts type challenge. We've got 4 teams in Pure. Everyone that comes to work at Pure, whether you're an administrator or a director or a cleaner, doesn't matter. You're in one of these teams, no option. And the teams are sort of I call elephant, moose, antelope, and tiger. Unfortunately, I'm in moose. But I had no choice in that. They've all got these things, and the idea is during the year, there's different things that we do. Now you'll be mixed in a team, which could be north, south. I could have some of my team members from Manchester, some from Cornwall, some from London, wherever. and you sort of compete with other teams. Now that's not just in these Gojo challenges. I don't know if you've seen us doing these Gojo challenges on every 3 months or so. We'll do these Gojo challenges, which are an app that you can do like a challenge about how far you can run, cycle, swim, or do gym work over the course of a month, and we can compete in teams like that against each other. But also things like, have you done a blog post? Have you linked things on social media? These different points you can get, and that means that one team at the end of the year will win, and we have a big awards ceremony at Christmas for it on the 17th. So these sorts of things, we're deliberately putting them in place. We spend a lot of time and effort on these to try and get people, like I had at my junior job in Sheffield, where we had 15 junior members of staff, and we used to do regular socials and regular little rounders on a Sunday afternoon, or pub trips, or on a Thursday payday we'd go out for a few drinks. I'm really keen, and we're really keen to keep an element of that social enjoyment outside of work with teammates for anyone who wants to do it, and loads of people do. So we have lots of social events, lots of team building events, pub quiz type things, which they sound rubbish, but they're actually really quite good. There's been some brilliant things that we've done. The guys from Yorkshire went on a go-karting. We put budget behind it. Go-karting trip this last weekend, where they're all, no one's injured, so they're all driving around non-whiplashed this last weekend. So we're keen to maintain and develop that. And again, I think as you get bigger, the temptation is not to do that, because it's just cost. If you look at it purely from a balance sheet point of view, the CPD days, maybe £14,000 a day, do 3 of them a year, fine. But I want to do it because I want to maintain what we set out to do. So we're happy to invest back into the staff, back into the team, and hopefully, our turnover of staff is very low. That rewards itself by people wanting to come on board. And recruitment, as you say, if you look at some of the comments we've got on things like LinkedIn, on Twitter, and the feedback from Indeed and our Indeed pages, which anyone want FCP job, definitely look at our Indeed pages. But it's if you look at that, that's all positive, and hopefully what we're trying to put in place feeds into that. So it's good because we want to do it and we want that culture, but also it's got a knock-on business benefit, which is staff enjoy it. They can see that they want to work somewhere where they're feeling valued. Yes, that we want people to work hard, but we want to reward that as well.
Yeah, like you've got so many opportunities. You've mentioned a few different things that you're doing. How do you stay focused on what you're doing? Like we were talking before about things were just coming to you all the time now. How do you stay fixed on that?
It's a really interesting one. I mean, I'm probably not the best person to ask that question of, because I'd say I go, I'm enthusiastic about everything. Sometimes things will come, and we mentioned this before, where I'll perhaps be talking to, as was this morning, a primary care network that were thinking about, could we GP their existing staff over? During the conversation, I don't think it would have made sense for him. So I was just honest and said, I actually think we could perhaps support you in different ways around supervision and roadmap sign off. But do you want to potentially destabilize your existing team, which sound like they're doing a good job? I would encourage you not to do it. And that was the end of my pitch, which was saying, don't use us. Keep what you've got. We can perhaps add some support in, which I think they're really keen for. So we're of a size now, and hopefully of a reputation where we don't need to go for everything. If something makes sense and we think we can add value to it, we think we can help. I've become completely obsessed with data, which I never thought I would be. So we collate. We see about 23,000 NHS patients per month. We collate all this data, and then we send it back to the people that we're working with to demonstrate how we're managing their patients, etc. It's fascinating, really, really fascinating stuff. And we've got some guys doing PhDs as well at Pure, who are using the data to publish research. So I think as we continue to grow and as we continue to develop, integrating and demonstrating this stuff is increasingly important. And it's that continual looking for the next thing, or just it comes to you. As I say, people will introduce ideas to you. I mean, we had an interesting one the other day saying, could we help with some clinics in Morocco? And my immediate reaction was, definitely we want to get involved in Morocco. But our operations director, Tom Beadle, said, look, we do not want to get involved in Morocco. We haven't got the headspace. Now, in my mind, that sounds fantastic, but yeah, probably rightly so. Probably it's not the right time for us to start looking at opportunities in Morocco. We'll see. But it's interesting. I think we don't just, as I say, don't just do MSK clinics, don't just do FCP, don't just do MSK pathway elements or triage elements. We've got a really nice mixture. And I think that's something that's been delivered right back from that 2010-ish nightmare when we lost that big 80% of our revenue. We have to keep diverse, not just for the stability of the business, but also for skill mix of the physios. Physios might not just want to do FCP forever. I think, to be fair, FCP forever, it will suit some people, but not the majority. The majority will want to do a little bit of rehab or a little bit of sports stuff or a little bit of occupational health stuff, a little bit of management stuff, a little bit of pain management stuff. We've got that ability to mix and match a bit more now, which I think is what's going to give us the long-term stability. And it also gives us the ability to say yes to more opportunities, because we're not just FCP or not just MSK clinics. We can look at pain stuff, we can look at frailty stuff, we can look at orthopedic waiting list work, because we've got people with different interests. So there's lots, like I say, lots of opportunities. We get some really fascinating things coming through as a sort of, could you look at this, could you look at that? Often we can, but we won't say yes to everything. If we don't think we can help, then we'll be really honest with that and say no.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think it's really good for your employees that they can mix in and experience NHS, experience this, because we deal with a lot of people. NHS has traditionally been our biggest client, and their understanding and just from exposure of that revenue, of how they make a business case, asking for things, is just, no, we don't do that. You don't do that. Whereas really, budgets are huge in the NHS. There's billions and billions in there. So how are you seeing that your staff are learning quite a bit from being exposed to a number of different areas then?
I think in the last couple of years, I think as in MSK physio in England, there's been an absolute explosion of FCP opportunities. And we've been doing FCP since 2016. So we were well into this before additional roles reimbursement scheme in 2019 kicked off. 3 years before, we're doing 2016. Since that kicked off, there's been a huge migration rush, if you want, gold rush, if you want, of MSK physios into FCP. And I think what I think we're going to see, we may not be seeing it yet, is a bit of a pullback to people that are doing FCP, thinking actually we want to do a bit more of a mixture of things. Because if you're very experienced, I don't know, very experienced, if you're experienced and you like just assessment, the triage element of FCP, brilliant. But I think we're already seeing it in Pure. People, it's quite nice to have a bit of a mixture in your role. But because FCP pays so well, it's gonna suck in a lot of people, and it has done. I just think we're gonna see hopefully a bit of a rebalancing. I was chatting to Jack Chew on a podcast early part of this year around sort of defending FCP as a concept, and it's not really about defending it. It's a great concept, fantastic thing, huge step forward for our profession, but it isn't the profession. The rehab pathways are crucial, and a good rehab physio, a good MSK physio in an MSK setting will have a huge impact on demedicalizing, deprescribing, restoration of normality, reducing their dependency on medical need, etc. And we need to value that role probably more. So what we're really trying to do in Pure is absolutely give the opportunity to say, yeah, FCP is brilliant and it's great. You can get loads of experience, but you don't need to stay in FCP. There's other things around that you can mix and match a bit. What we're seeing though is most people that go into FCP stay in FCP until they don't want to go FCP at all anymore. So rather than mix and match, they just go on something else. It'll be interesting the next few years to see how that changes. I mean, things like before we became on air, as it were, diagnostic ultrasound, shockwave, a lot of these elements, particularly diagnostic ultrasounds, now being discussed more and more in primary care setting. And it's trying to see how that sits in FCP, or is it in MSK pathways? How do we bring in some of the evidence around shockwave therapy into MSK pathways? It sits in private practice really quite well, I think, at the minute. How do we integrate that into NHS pathways if it's deemed to be appropriate? And as you've alluded to, some of the structures, historic structure of the NHS, make it difficult to convert evidence into practice. We're fortunate that we can just look at something and think, yeah, this makes sense, we'll do it. And actually commissioning bodies generally look at that and say, yeah, that does make sense. You presented that, this is the evidence that supports it. Yeah, we'll try that. We'll give it 2 years and see how it goes. And that's what we're seeing more and more, is using a bit of innovation and relating it to evidence and the data we've got perhaps from other areas. And then commissioners are often prepared to look at giving something a go and reviewing it and using it as a trial. That's how we started our FCP in 2016. Was exactly that.
I think it's really exciting to bring some of that privatized element into the NHS. I think it's a good collaborative approach, isn't it? Because there's elements. The NHS is an amazing thing.
Absolutely.
But there's loads of great clinicians in there, like some of the people that we work in there, and some of them have branched off into doing some commercial work within the NHS, but it's few and far between. And it's a shame in a way, because of that there's so many great clinicians with great facilities, great equipment that could be being used to maximize more 7 days a week, say. So it is interesting.
Definitely. I think it's very, I mean, the NHS is absolutely amazing. You know, all my 3 children were born in the NHS, and I've worked in the NHS. My wife worked in the NHS for many, many years. My little son had Perthes disease. Amazing orthopedic paediatric consultant here in Norfolk. Great job with him. He's fantastic now. Back to football and cricket, far better than I ever was at either. You know, but some of the innovations that I think independent sector can bring, just in the thinking, is generally welcomed, and I see that in primary care a lot, because primary care, GP practice essentially were their own businesses, and even PCNs kind of their own. It does encourage that initiative being taken, the ideas being used, and I think that's something to be welcomed. You know, I would argue there's no or very little profiteering to be had in primary care at all. Possibly in the NHS, but hopefully in the NHS. But it's where you can add value and do things more efficiently and increase patient, you know, experience, or better, improve patient experience. That's why, again, I've become such a big fan of data. You know, let's ask, see what they think. Have they found this good or not? If they haven't, what can we do to make it different for them? And I'm a big fan of this demedicalizing sort of approach to the vast majority of MSK problems. They shouldn't need doctors, they shouldn't need physios, they should need PTs, or, you know, people just encouraging them to be more active. Slight changes in lifestyle at the right time can prevent knock-on effects that cost millions down the line as a population. So you know, people like social prescribers in primary care, health and wellbeing coaches in primary care, brilliant. And dietitians in primary care, brilliant. You know, there's some great stuff coming through, and that's what's really exciting. And I think that will continue. I think it's a very good move by NHS.
Great. No, that's it. And finally, last question, because we've been on for quite a while now. But what's the visions for you then, like going forward? What do you see for yourself? I know you've been involved with NHS England and the company.
Yeah, I had a brilliant meeting this morning with one of the other Health Education England ambassadors, and I think I am really passionate about this, as I just said, this sort of primary care MDT approach, multidisciplinary team, and the idea of trying to get people back to realizing what normal is. Everyone's got a little bit of osteoarthritic change. Everyone's got a little bit of you know, degeneration of their lumbar discs over the age of, well, probably 20. And actually that's normality. That's not a pathology. That's just life. So I do see us getting more and more. I don't want to say us, I mean Pure generally. We've got some fantastic clinicians. Richard Morford, big believer in this as well. Is trying to normalize people's, you know, this idea of treating the person, not the scan, and an extension from that, really saying, let's just get people back to thinking, just because you've got a little bit of degenerative change or a little bit age-related change here doesn't mean you can't do X, Y, and Z. In fact, it probably encourages you to do X, Y, and Z more. It's how we articulate that. So I think that is a message that we want to continue to try and get out and probably be more vocal about. And I think a lot of physios are trying to push that as well. That's a good thing. I think Pure over the next 2 or 3 years, I think will continue to grow really well. We've got some such exciting things going on at the minute. Brilliant partnerships. And really exciting things in the MSK field, in pain, primary care. As I say, far better people than myself now are heavily involved in Pure. So it's lovely to be able to sit back and add something to it, hopefully, but also see them developing. And personally, get back to cutting my grass probably is the key. No, it's so dry at the minute, there's nothing to cut. So no, I think as you said earlier on, Andy, I'm not planning my retirement anytime soon. I don't know when I'm going to retire. It's nice to say, nice to think, oh, I'd like to retire early. And I think everyone's going to say that. I say that, great to retire early. The reality is, as the holiday last week proved, I was on holiday. I did enjoy it. I did let my hair down, what hair I've got left. But I equally, I enjoy what I do. I don't need the break because I enjoy it. So it's a funny thing. So I see myself here at Pure for a good while yet.
No, it's great. You can feel your enthusiasm. It's great to see the company's absolutely flying at the moment. So I really appreciate you sharing your time because I know you're hectic. So Finn, it's been great, and thank you for that. And I hope to catch up with you soon.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Finn. Thank you.